Well, we've been having a lot of fun this morning, and so I thought we would continue with a little more fun, and instead of a dull, old, boring sermon, I'm going to share a little story with you this morning that I will keep brief, as I know we're getting late here, and I know you all want to enjoy your Father's Day. So, I want to tell you a story about a young boy named Christopher. Christopher was a freshman in high school, 14 years old, and lived in a community that was very much like we have here in Kittery Point, although it wasn't on the ocean, so the seafood wasn't as good where he lived, but still a pretty good community. Christopher's mom had divorced and she had remarried, and so Christopher had two younger siblings. He had Molly, who was in second grade, and Owen, who was in fourth grade. And because Christopher was a little bit older than his siblings, it was his responsibility to watch them often after school. So he would leave high school and he would walk home and pick up his brother and his sister on the way home, and they would walk home after school, and then they would do their homework together and they would play games. And he had noticed recently that as they were playing games and doing their homework, that they were asking some strange questions. They were starting to ask him, why their friends were picking on each other at school, why some of the fifth graders had gotten into a fight at the elementary school one day, and asking why some of the other kids were calling each other names. And unfortunately, Christopher didn't really have a good answer for that. And he admitted to them that he was thinking some of the same things himself. He was watching the news at night and seeing people talking about war and reading the newspapers, and they were talking about all kinds of sad things. And he was wondering why so much sadness was in the world and why things were the way that they were, and he was hoping that maybe there was a way that he could do something about that, to maybe make a change in the world, but he didn't really know how to do that. And so he asked his teachers, he asked his piano teacher, he asked his youth group leader, he asked his parents what he could do to make a change, and unfortunately, they didn't really have an idea that worked for him. They came up with some ideas, but nothing really hit home. And so, that Sunday morning, Christopher went to church with his family, as they always did, with these same questions in mind. And he was wondering, maybe something in church that Sunday would give him an idea how to make the world a better place. But as they walked into church that Sunday, things didn't look the way they normally looked. As they walked up, people weren't inside and smiling. Most of the people were actually outside in front of the church, and they had gathered around this new sign that the church had just put up to say that everybody in the community was welcome at that church. And he noticed that some people looked kind of sad, and some people were even crying. And then it looked like there was a police officer standing over there, and he was wondering what could have happened. And so he wanted to get over and see what was going on, but his mother said, no, it's time to go in the church. Well, when they got in the church, they went to their normal pew on the left, 2 rows down, right where Elaine and Nancy and Gudrun are sitting. And they heard people chatting and talking, and realized that what had happened was overnight someone had taken that brand new sign that they had out there and they had spray painted it with some not very nice words. And so people were pretty upset in the church because there was this nice new sign with now all this spray paint all over it. And so they wondered that Sunday what the minister was going to say. Would she address this issue in her sermon? Would she talk about it? And she actually didn't. What she decided to do was to tell them the story of a story. And it was the same parable that you heard a few minutes ago about that little mustard seed. And she said, see what's in between my fingers here? See how tiny this is? That's how big a mustard seed is. Would fit right in between my fingers here. And the mustard seed is interesting because it was the smallest seed in Jesus' day. But when it was planted, it would grow up into a big tree or a bush that was 10 feet tall, so even taller than that pulpit there. 10 feet tall, so big that birds could land in it and make their nests in it, and people could grab their lunch and sit underneath it and be nice and cool in the summertime. And she said that what they were going to do in response to what had happened was they were going to plant their own mustard seeds. Well, Christopher sat in the back of the church and scratched his head and thought, mustard seeds? We're going to plant trees? How is that a response to someone spray painting our sign? So he didn't want anything to do with this. They were going to do it after church. He said, Mom, I don't want to go downstairs. I don't want to do it. And his mom said, no, let's go downstairs and let's see what this is all about. So Christopher went downstairs and he expected to see pots and soil and seeds laid out on the table, but there wasn't. There were crayons, and there were markers, and there was construction paper in every color of the rainbow laid out on these tables, and wooden sticks, and glue, and tape. And so they sat down behind one of the tables, wondering what was going on, and a deacon came over and told them that they were going to be making pinwheels that Sunday. And they thought, well, that's odd. Okay, so she showed them how to fold these pinwheels and to make this nice little pinwheel that you could hang on this stick and it would spin around. And she said, but before you pin it on the stick, I want you to think about a word, a phrase, a picture, something that you can write on one of the spokes, each of the spokes. And I want you to think of a word that would be something that you'd like to see in the world that's different than the meanness that you saw on the sign that was out there that morning. So they thought about it, and Christopher looked around and noticed that some people were writing words like love and acceptance and tolerance and unity. Some people were drawing doves and hearts, and his sister had drawn a little smiley face on hers. And so what he did was he wrote the word peace, and he wrote the little peace symbol on his. What they were told after that is that they were going to go out in front of the church and they were going to plant all of these pinwheels all over the front lawn of the church. And the idea was that when the wind blew and all those pinwheels started to spin, all the good thoughts that were written on the pinwheels would be blown off into the world to make the world a better place. And so that's what the minister came over and said to them. As they were planting those little pinwheels, the minister said, "This is your mustard seed. You're planting a pinwheel. It's a little thing, but it's going to make a big difference in the world. Trust me." And so Christopher thought, really, a pinwheel, putting a pinwheel in the ground, would that really make a big difference in the world? So he went home, and it didn't take him long that week to realize that the answer to that question was yes. Because as they were walking home from school each day, Christopher would walk by the front of the church with all those pinwheels that were spinning each day. And one day he noticed that there were these two men out there that he'd never seen before, and they were wiping all the spray paint off that sign. And another day he noticed that someone had put these gorgeous roses all around the foot of the sign. One day there was three women standing out in front singing. Another day there was a family seated out there, a little kid racing through the pinwheels, blowing on them, making them spin, laughing with delight. And so Christopher went to church that following Sunday after seeing this all week, and he wondered what the minister was going to say, what was going to happen. And the minister stood up and said, "Well, last week you did plant those mustard seeds, and they have come home in a big way. They have grown into something really big." And she told them that people had volunteered to clean the sign for free, that a lawn mowing company had said that they would come and mow their lawn in between all those pinwheels for free, that there were other churches in town that had started making pinwheels and writing things on them and putting them on their lawns as a sign to show them that they supported the church. And all these other stories. There were people talking about how people seem more friendly in town, how someone saw someone else helping them with their groceries to get out to the car one day. And then she said, "But the one thing I want to share with you is an email that was sent to me." And so she pulled out a piece of paper like this, and she read it. And it said, "Dear Reverend Thompson, I've never been to your church, and in fact haven't been to church since I was a child and my parents brought me. Today when I drove by your church and saw all of those pinwheels, it reminded me of a Sunday when I was a child. Easter Sunday, in fact. My parents had given me a pinwheel in my Easter basket, and I proudly carried it to church, spinning it all the way. I remembered how simple life seemed back then, and how happy I was, and how I was so sure that I could make a difference, that I could make the world a better place. Over the years, I haven't always done my best, but because of those pinwheels I saw out in your front lawn, I'm changing my ways. I'm trying to be kinder and to love more. Thank you for giving me the inspiration to try and make the world a better place." And with that, the minister didn't need to say any more. Her sermon had been preached for her. And Christopher realized that he had done something. He had done something very simple that had made a big difference, and he could rest assured that he was helping to make the world a better place. The story I just shared with you is fictitious. It is made up. But the idea behind the pinwheels is not. There is an organization out there called Pinwheels for World Peace, and that is WHIRLED, World Peace. It was started in 2005 by two art teachers in Florida who wanted to make a difference in their community on the International Day of Peace, which falls each year in September. And so they got this idea of creating pinwheels that they would put outside, and the same story holds, that the idea is the wind would blow and those thoughts would be blown into the world, hopefully to make the world a better, more peaceful place. Started very modestly in the year 2005, and as of the year 2011, last September, some 3.5 million pinwheels were planted all over the world. The idea being that they would whisk these good thoughts and these ideas into the world. And so I offer that to you today because you have a pinwheel to take home with you, I hope. And you can do one of two things with that. You can write on there. It may be hard to write, they're plastic. You can maybe think some good thoughts with that and plant it in your yard and watch it spin and have those good thoughts be blown out into the world. Or you can put it on your dresser at home, somewhere where you'd see it in the morning, and as you get up and you comb your hair, look at that pinwheel and realize that we can all do something simple. A small seed of faith, of courage, of love, of compassion. A small seed of something can make a really, really big difference in this world. And so I hope that every time you see that pinwheel that you will remember that, and that we will go forth to all make the world a better place. Amen. We will sing one final hymn this morning, number 391 in your black hymnals, In the Midst of New Dimensions.